We're back. It's another reverse. No, it's another Not a Show with Captain Blackburn, Joshua Blackburn. And as soon as I find the intro, I'm going to go live. But we're live now. I'm tired.
It's been
This is not a show. It might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and guest.
First, my guest is Joshua, Captain Blackburn. And today we're going to talk about the image of God. I forgot that we were going to talk about that. It's been so long since we've actually met.
We've been busy.
How you doing, man?
Doing well. Just plugging away. You've been working on a house, if I remember correctly. Or maybe you've just been supervising while your wife lays beautiful floors.
She does lay beautiful floors. But while she does floors, I do the painting. I do the beautiful walls. And other little things. But so I was going to talk about something else, but we do need to talk about the image of God. And I did look at Jim Pass's. We were looking at page 27 on the image of God. And it kind of gets to something that, I mean, I'm going to go, this is not something that I diverge from the conventional wisdom here, the conventional interpretation here.
Whatever that is.
Huh?
Whatever that might be, the conventional.
Well, whatever it is. I mean, the conventional understanding, and it was in that section, is talking about how the image of God is purely spiritual. Mm-hmm. And he has passed on the image that is purely, and that is blasphemy to say that we are, that it is a physical thing. But I take umbrage with that. All right. Okay. At least I push back on that.
Okay. In
the sense that we are particularly made, and on top of that, Christ has a visual and something of a physical body.
That's true.
And the likeness.
Very true.
He does. And Christ happens to be in the triune thing that we were designed after.
See, now there would be where I would depart.
Okay. That's what I want to hear. Yeah.
As far as this distinction between the substance, the only likeness. Well, so the likeness does not go as far as a triadic substance of God.
Right.
That would be where I'd depart.
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about, the soul and the spirit and the body. I mean, that is sort of a triadic substance.
Well, just because there's three doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. To me.
Maybe.
And many others.
Half of the others.
Because, something like that.
No, you're right. That sort of boggles the mind, but
that gets into incomprehensibility, like we were talking about.
Right. Like that, but it has to be included that, I mean, that God would create his creation, and it says that we were made in the image, right? And there's nothing you can't in the same breath say, to me, I can't in the same breath say that we were made in the image of God, mm-hmm. something that is seen, and at the same time made spirit, something which is, based on his spirit, something which is unseen.
So, I mean, but understand, images. So, image made in his image, Let us make man in our image and in our likeness.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a relationship there. It's kind of like if I took a picture of you, that's an image of you, but it is not you, right? But
Oh, right.
yet,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it is you.
Well, what is the key there? It's being, and it's kind of what it's something that we were
But
talking about as far as soul. It's distinguishability, right?
well, there's distinguishability, but I think one of the things that to me that's fundamental about and I'll use orthodox here in a lowercase o, not big O.
Okay.
Orthodox theology is this creator creature distinction, this
Mm-hmm.
radical otherness that even though there's a likeness in an image, there's also, so it's not but, it's and there is a radical otherness. And
I don't disagree.
just like, if I took a picture of you, that is an image of you, that is an icon of you, and
It is not
it truly
the
is, and it's not the same.
Yeah,
It's
I
both
completely
and.
agree.
Yeah.
And there has to be something in my view, and
Yeah.
and I've had this argument millions of times with other people, maybe even you. I can't remember.
Probably.
I don't. We might be a little bit closer on this one, but there has to be somewhere in my theology a place for the visible,
Oh, sure.
distinguishable,
Absolutely.
how we're made. It wasn't random. First of all, I do
No.
not believe God is random. He's very purposeful.
It's
He
not.
knew that, and Christ was human,
and therein lies the nexus, right? Because when we read about it in chapter, like in the very beginning of Scripture, it's only later that we realize that we're made in the image of the image, that Christ is the image of the Father.
Yeah.
And our goal is to become like Him, who is the image of the
Likeness,
Father,
like
right?
Him.
So
Yes,
yeah,
you
so
and I, so far,
that's
yes,
yeah. I mean, so
yes.
It's like we got to fast forward and get to like
Mm-hmm.
Christification. Like it's one thing to be transformed into the likeness of God. When we retain that language, but it becomes much more specific and incarnational and visible in a way when we are made in becoming more in His image, and His image being that of Christ.
Yeah.
The first chapter of Colossians is pretty bold about that.
Interesting. I had never made the connection with Colossians.
That's why
let's pull it out.
That's why I came prepared. We're gonna have this Bible study tonight here on Not a Show.
Well, while you're opening that up, I've gone as far as to say, okay, even if we're not, even if physically we don't resemble something in God, and it's just something, it's hard to disagree. In my mind, it's hard for me to disagree with the idea that at least the way we and Christ were created, everything is something that pointed to something in God. And so one thing that my dad talks about is that I really appreciated. He said this once and it just blew my mind. He said, what is the difference between the major difference between humans and animals? And that is that our vulnerable parts are continually open to each other in relationship. Whereas animals, like, they'll sniff each other's butts, but they are not, their backs are predominantly showing, the strongest, most, bony part of them. Their snouts with their teeth are the most prominent. Us, we don't have snouts. Our nipples and groins are open to attack,
Well, sure. Yeah, we're certainly vulnerable. Though I would say monkeys and gorillas are also vulnerable.
Yeah, it's true. That is true.
So,
but predominantly, Animals,
but yes, like compared to 99%
Most
of all other critters, as we might say.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's you think
And even
about some of
monkeys, they don't
the
they don't walk around. They mostly don't walk around on 2 feet. They walk around on 4.
unforced, but sometimes they're on twos. But so do bears. But, I think about Exodus and Moses talking to God face to face. Like these types of course, technically speaking, God doesn't have a face, but then yet he does.
He must, because it says he does.
He does. Well, it's metaphor, but and even a good Jew knows that. And I mean, the only face of God is Christ.
Yeah, but it still a face. That's not a metaphor. That's a real face.
That's a real face, right?
Yeah,
but that's not. So it gets complicated.
It does get very complicated. I'm not saying it's not complicated. I'm not saying there aren't things that are like, I don't understand. I can't make, but I do understand. I do believe, at least, that doesn't mean it's like, oh, we don't talk about it. It's like, I think there are things to be worked out here that we can learn about God, and we can learn about our own purpose, right? Imagio Dei. There's something very important there to our purpose and our existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is that?
Well, I'm not sure if I'd be more than happy to jump in there, but I guess one of the things I'm hesitant to do is to jump too far ahead without us, really rumbling with more with what the term the image of God means.
Okay, let's get to that.
I'll say this. I will to answer your question. I mean, like, but what does the image call us to? The image calls us to. Some might stop at God likeness. There is a significant portion of Christian thinkers and believers who would argue that the image calls us to godness, to be partakers of the divine nature, to use St. Peter's language, to be participants in God, which is a little bit different than to be like. A lot of times people, I think, when they think of being godlike or godliness, they think about it in a moral perspective as opposed to an ontological perspective.
Moral, spiritual, yeah.
Right? Versus ontology, like of being transformed, of being of man transcending his creatureliness in a way. The incarnation creates a bridge to godness. To divinity, to partake of the divine nature.
Why is it anathema, heresy, to say that God looks like us?
Because it's always been a heresy.
Yeah, but why?
It's an anthropomorphism, and the reason I think being is that
isn't it sort of arrogant to say
because it localizes? Because it localizes, it makes it so. Christ as a person of the Trinity is an aspect, is a person, is a diversity and unity, but the unity, the substance, it transcends something as finite as an anthropomorphism. I mean, said a different way, though, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable if you're a Mormon.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's perfectly acceptable to say that Jesus is our brother too. But
or all kinds of other things.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is, I guess this is the thought that crosses my mind.
Sure.
You're creating something, and you know that your son or your daughter, right, is going to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you create it to be? I mean, would you create it to be something wildly different than what you can, that how you think of your son or daughter?
Well, see, and I think that's the distinction here, is that the image isn't wildly different and is not to be confused with the original. It kind of, I mean, and I'll use the metaphor, it's a metaphor of a painting or a picture of a person, where that is a likeness, and it is an image of the person, but it is not the person. And yet,
No, I agree.
if it's a good image, if it's a really good likeness, it kind of is. But in its substance, it is not.
But
And
I do
therein
not.
lies, I think, the distinction is the substance.
But even in the substance, all right, in the substance, God isn't random. He doesn't just, let's give them beards.
Well, no, it's certainly
hair on their cheek might be fun.
It's not random. I mean,
right.
It's certainly not random. It's intentional, but I'm not sure if, like, the opposite of random of it being
except that it says he created them in his image.
Mm-hmm. But therein lies the big question: what is an image?
Well, okay. Other than God, is there anywhere in any language, that an image is something other than something you can see?
We're not saying that it's not seeable.
Well, if it's not seeable,
the image is obviously
seeable,
tangible, right? The image is obviously tangible.
Oh, well, to me, I believe that, but that would blow. That would you're going to get somebody mad by saying that. Like, I believe that
the image is tangible, right? But is God tangible?
Image
in the same way, in the same way that the image is tangible.
Well, it reflects him. You're right. It reflects him.
And therein lies, I think, the difficulty with language. I mean, and I think it gets a little more fun if I use the Greek translation of, the icon of God.
But the likeness of God,
Well, therein lies a more interesting discussion of, in his likeness he made them. There's a series of varying interpretations of what the likeness means. Just throwing that out there because there's smarter people than me.
Likeness. I know. And so let me read you what I think this is really good. What it says in Jim sent us a really good primer here. I think it's got some interesting stuff. Well, I think what it has is like real good. It digs into interpretation, and I think that's good. So it says, this is what he says. God and Father conferred with other members of the Trinity. Let us make asa. Asa here means to make. Okay, wait. In our image, according to our likeness. What is image? What is the image and likeness of God? Bet Salem conveys a spiritual rather than body facsimile, a shadow image. See, that's where I take umbrage. I don't agree.
Well, this is, but you follow, like, man is not a duplication of God.
Right. That's about blasphemous thought. But has an inferior finite correspondence to God. Shadow image describes the essence of a man's soul. See, I don't agree. Which was patterned after the divine essence, only in the sense that it's immaterial, spiritual, rational, moral, and relational. I agree with those things, but this, to me, doesn't go far enough.
Doesn't go far enough in what way?
These things are in the likeness of God, our rational, relational, spiritual aspects, moral aspects. But like you said, it's more than the moral. It's more than, to me, the relational aspect. Our relational aspect is tied up, is indivisible from our physical aspect. We cannot communicate without physicality.
We can't.
It's important.
We
Well,
can't.
True, but
And I think that's
how God made us, and
I
He's
think that's
very
the difficulty of
intentional.
being finite, right? I mean, like that.
But here's the thing,
finitude.
though. Here's the thing: is that Jesus can't either.
Jesus can't what?
He cannot communicate without His body.
Sure he can.
How?
There was a time we didn't have one.
I don't know that that's true.
I know that's true because that's what the Bible says.
Where does it say
tells me so? In Matthew
where does
1,
it say
in Matthew
He
1
didn't have a body?
and he took a body.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. But he has a body
was
now,
a
right?
time, and I don't like that word time, when he didn't have a body.
You're right.
And he took one.
I can see that point.
That was prepared.
And yet he could not communicate with his disciples without his body.
Well,
when he was
he could.
Even after transfiguration.
He just chose not to.
Well, I don't know about that.
Why not?
I don't know. Maybe that's true.
I'm not sure if there's a way to prove
says
that.
Not. It never says that.
No, it doesn't.
And he has a body now, just like ours. Well, not just like ours, right?
No, not just like ours. Just like
it
ours.
Looks like a body.
Plus.
Yeah. Just like ours. Well, and we'll have a body like that, right?
Yes. Well, that's what St. Paul says. That's what's all 1 Corinthians 15 is all about. And I think for me, the other issue is that there's a lot of things that are I don't want to use the word progressive, or not progressive, but I don't want to use the word conditional. They're progressive and developmental.
Like they're stages, right?
Well, I mean, the reality is, man, Adam, in the garden was one way, but the way we experience life in the body is different than the way it was in the garden.
True.
The resurrection is the transcending, the transformation, and just the utter restoration of the fall, of the consequences and the disease of sin. So I don't know, and I think in the beginning there's certainly this destiny of life in the body, but to me that's the life in the body for us is sort of like the natural consequence of not being God, like of being finite, and yet I would argue, that our finitude is called towards infinity, and it's something that's never entirely transcended, and yet there is something that incomprehensible, mysterious, that ultimately results in union and communion with God.
Yeah.
Where God remains God and we remain creatures.
On that note, Lyndon, thanks he gave us a thumbs up too.
Not
as
in
well
human body.
Scott Pinot, he says God. So Lyndon says God communicated with Moses, not being in human body. I mean, that's true.
Yeah,
He communicated as a flame.
It's metaphor, right? It's like face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. Right.
He also says Jesus communicated with Saul on Damascus Road in his heavenly form, which is so bright and visible to the human body, invisible to the human body of Saul, that it blinded him and he fell to the ground. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's that plus.
Well, it's certainly plus. But I mean, you think about all the other
That's good. Thank you, Lennon. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's
point. God revealing himself in various ways throughout the Old Testament.
The Christophanies.
Well, sometimes they're Christophanies, or you can call them maybe theophanies, like God showing forth. And sometimes it's like the angels visiting with Abraham. The warrior with Joshua before going into the promised land. I
mean, most of those could be interpreted as Christ or the three persons of God,
or just a revelation, a showing forth. I don't know if I want to read too much into those.
Lyndon says, not that I know.
We don't know much about it either, Lyndon, so don't feel too bad.
Yeah, we don't. We're just talking about it. Thank you for, thanks for taking part in
this. Is what we call spitballing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's what I call figuring out, just like together with you guys, with Lyndon and Scott, whoever takes part, and actually vicariously through Jim as he shared this with us, like wrestling with, because it's hard to get past the interpretation. What is the word? Bet Salem conveys a spiritual rather than body flexibility. So but it always comes down to one's theology, though, right? I mean, any interpretation,
right? And by theology, I'm assuming you mean like theology proper. Like, who is God and what is God like?
Yeah. And I guess it is important to me, not in a Mormon way. I do want to make that distinction. Like, it's not important for me that God is man. Like, I don't want him to be man.
That God has a human body.
I don't want God to have a human body. That's nothing. I don't believe that God has a human body. Mm-hmm. And I give weight to that. Here's the other thing is I don't, as you saw with our discussion of the soul, I don't give much weight to the spirit. Or I don't give it more weight than I do the body. Like many people give much more weight as if the body is a crude thing that God just randomly, well, I guess I'll just give him this thing.
Well, no, it's
for a while.
I think everyone can agree that it's not accidental. The body is not accidental, and yet the body certainly can be, in some ways, rather crude.
Can be what?
Rather crude. Rather animal, right? It's not angelic. It's not spiritual in that way.
I don't know. I've never seen an angel.
You're right.
And from what I read in the Bible of angels, they are a lot like humans.
So I'm told. So they tell me.
But told by who?
Very human-like, right?
Yeah. I mean, they hold people's hands, right? We know that. They are mistaken for
humans,
men.
Yeah,
all the time.
Beautiful men.
Beautiful. They're beautiful.
Beautiful men.
But see, what is beautiful?
In the Near East. No, certainly. And
it seems odd to me. I mean, maybe, huh?
I don't know. There's a part of it. It's like, yeah. I on the one hand, I go, this is not an accident, and you can ask my wife. The body can be pretty crude. Like you got kids, you get it.
Yeah, I do, and
I'll just put it this way. I've got 4 girls at home, and they can put some crude things down the pipes. I mean, just flat crude, right? But
I get that.
but we're called, right? Even though we're animals, we really are. We're called to become like God. We're called to godness. I'll even use like Greek words like divinization or theosis or St. Peter's good, partakers of the image, partakers of the divine nature.
There's something. Okay, so all right, and okay, let's get into another thing. And the reason this is something I wanted to talk about anyways, because, and I think it goes along with this. Let's get away from the crude and go to the divine.
Okay.
It just dawned on me today. So in North Carolina, everybody fewer people are wearing masks.
Okay.
Fewer and fewer employees are wearing masks. Okay.
So the pandemic is officially over.
Whatever.
In North Carolina.
Whatever it was. But I went into a store I always go to today, and this is the only place that I would wear a mask because the lady screamed at me.
She lovingly, in a neighbor-like way.
Well, you know what she said? She said, "I have to wear a mask. You're gonna have to wear a mask too." And you know what? I said, "I respect that."
It's kind of hard to argue with that.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, your turf, your rules. But I go to the counter today, and she's not wearing a mask, and I just couldn't help but smile. And I said, at the end of it, I said, I didn't quite fully understand how evil the masks were until I felt how righteous it was to see your smile. And she laughed, because she remembers yelling at me, whatever.
She remembers throwing things at you. Yeah.
But she's sort of you can tell that she sort of doesn't like the mask either. It was just that, I gotta wear when you gotta wear. So, but that phrase dawned on me, and I don't want to necessarily get into masks, but I think it's good to talk about it in terms of the image of God is like the divinity of a smile, the divinity of communication through our body, kind of like I was talking about before, is vulnerability, to each other and connection through our bodies, the communication.
This openness and connection. I guess, again, I'm not sure if I want to conflate that with divinity, but okay.
I forgot you have an allergy to that. Talking about that in the divinity.
It's just this creator-creature distinction. It's pretty fundamental to one's proper theology.
Proper.
And this is the thing. Like, did the mask inhibit connection? Did the mask inhibit connection?
Yes, okay. Yes, it did. Absolutely.
But were there connections even through masks?
Yes, okay. Yes, there was. Yeah.
So I mean, here's the thing, and this is the beautiful thing I think in my mind. Like the face is a medium. Like the real connection isn't like our faces touching each other. It's something else, right? Like it is something spiritual touching something spiritual. I mean, even from a biological perspective, I mean, it really is. It's like nervous system interacting with nervous system. It's energy interacting with energy, and then push back beyond that, and then we get into that's the only way I can describe it is that it is something spiritual. And it is most fully expressed with an open face. At that point, I will agree with you that it does hinder, right? Like it's a block. It's something in between. It's like I feel like there's something in between us. It's like it's a mask.
It doesn't shut it down though. I mean, that's a valid point.
That's the flip side, right? I mean, like it makes it more of a struggle. It doesn't entirely extinguish it. But it's going back to Exodus. I mean, it's like, and Moses talked to God like a friend, face to face. But again, it's metaphorical. It doesn't really.
A metaphor for what?
that connection, that level.
What does it
of,
mean if
that,
you
that, well,
take
that,
away
that
the
level
face,
of, the
take away the
level of
physical
intimacy.
face?
Well, so you take away the physical face. I mean, what is it? Biologically, it really is. It's nervous system meeting nervous system.
But God doesn't have a nervous system.
No, but God does have energy.
God has energy?
Oh yeah, he does. How do you think
physical energy?
Where do you think we are?
I mean, I believe that.
Where do you think we are? Everywhere.
What do you mean? I don't know. I don't get that. Where do you think we are?
Where do you think we are? So, is there a place that God is not? No.
Yeah, I do think there's a place God is not.
Okay.
Hell.
Where would that be? I think he's there too.
Well, he said he's not.
Okay.
He said he cannot be where sin is.
Okay. Quote the scripture, the chapter and verse on that one, Brother Judah.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, I look for that.
Metaphysically, that seems an impossibility.
Who shall change our vile body, that it may be fashioned like unto his glorious body, according to the working whereby he is able even to subdue all things unto himself. Philippians 3:20. There we go. Vile body.
Well, and again, like the body is in itself glorious. I mean, if you take the whole of Scripture, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. That's talking about our bodies. They're in quotes of psalmists. But sure. I mean, from Paul's perspective, and rightly so, what we are compared to what we are going to become, what we are compared to what we are called to, what we are compared to what we could be, is hugely different, right? Like the difference is vile.
I missed the first part. For our conversation is in heaven, from whence also we look for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. That's an important part. Who shall change our vile body?
Mm-hmm.
What makes our body vile?
Is
it just poop?
No. I think in that particular verse, I mean, really, because again, if you take Scripture as a whole, like we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
So, and we are made in God's likeness, and we are made in God's image, and Christ Himself is the image of the invisible God, and He has a body.
Was His body vile?
No. But the vile, like I think from Paul's perspective here, the vileness again is compared to where we are now compared to what we are called to be. It's the what's vile is the difference between our present reality and even what we could become within our present reality.
So that reminds me of a discussion I'm having with my son. He was curious about the disgusting.
Sure.
And he says, what makes things disgusting? And I said, God made, I told him God made dangerous things disgusting. I said, not all dangerous things are disgusting, but everything that is disgusting is ultimately dangerous in some way.
Potentially, right? I mean, yeah.
Potentially dangerous in some way.
Poop
and so he's trying to wrap his head around this, and he's like naming off things, it's like
maggots, poop.
Poop. Yeah, we get that, right? That's dangerous. But what about girls? Girls are disgusting,
Sure.
Well,
I mean,
they can be dangerous.
They can be dangerous, and they can sometimes be gross.
But what I wanted to convey to him is that things that are disgusting it's not because they're intrinsically evil, right?
Right.
Like
they're not
poisonous
evil.
things aren't evil. A poisonous snake isn't evil. A poop isn't evil, right? But God has given us something, has built in something that helps us avoid avoid the things that are probably most harmful for us, especially in certain times. I mean, you could say even girls at his age, like he doesn't need to be attracted to girls at
Girls are
age 7,
gross.
you know,
Yeah.
and so it's good to be,
Yeah, girls
you
are
know,
gross.
that would be dangerous, you know.
Yeah, like, you know, girls are gross until you hit age 25 or something, you know.
I'll keep telling him that.
Yeah, he won't believe you when you hit 13 or whatever. I don't know, whatever age. I can't read. Well, yeah, somewhere in there, I guess. But boys go girl crazy and girls go boy crazy. Jim,
Jim's in the chat. Good to have you, Jim. We were talking. By the way, I don't know if you caught the beginning, but we were talking. We're kind of interacting with creation, chaos, and restoration. He says the vial that you're discussing is the existence in us of our old sin nature, which will be removed when we receive our resurrection bodies, and the ability to exist in the universe. Well, that's what I was kind of getting at. Is like, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. That's a good segue. Get me out of talking about girls, but there is something that we have to like. I think too often we think of the body as being vile because of the crudeness of it, right? And crude is just I don't. It's hard to.
see.
It's hard to.
I mean, vile. I mean, and I have to pull out. I don't have a Greek New Testament here. The problem with the body, in addition to this inclination to sin, is the fact that it is weak. That in our present state, it succumbs to entropy. That it succumbs to death. And that it cuts totally against the intention, like our original form, right? So I mean, you know, going back to like, you know, God just didn't throw it together. You know, it's fearful. We're fearfully and wonderfully made.
But there's a difference, as you were saying. There's a difference between Adam and Eve.
Exactly.
And our
like,
bodies, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like they were not
state,
crude. They lacked that crudeness, right? They lacked that vulnerability.
By crudeness, I mean, like, again, it's well, they had vulnerability.
I don't think they did.
Well, how'd they fall?
Well, that's true. But physical, I guess I'm thinking of physical vulnerability.
Well, sure.
I feel like they would have lived forever.
Decay, disintegration. That's vile. In how sin and death and decay are all wrapped up. Just go back and read Romans. And that's large. I mean, and that's the thing. Like we I think in modern, in evangelicalism in general, there's often a legal and forensic focus about forgiveness of sins. But even like just in the epistles, I won't even go in the Gospels. There's a huge emphasis on this radical shift, like of redemption being ontological in nature. It's the total transformation of our being,
physical,
ultimately,
and spiritual.
Yeah. You know, going back to Jim's point, I mean, like that's, you know, for God to forgive sins. I mean, you don't even have to go back to the Old Testament. You go back to the Old Testament, it's like, you know, no problem. That part, the forensic part's actually, you know, relatively not that complex. It's the body that's the problem. It's decay that's the problem. It's death that's the problem. And then linked in there is sin.
And that's where, to me, it gets tricky. It's like the body that we are going to be presenting after the resurrection. What age is that? Is it accumulation of? Is it just an average age? You know, like that. That does start to boggle my mind a little bit.
That doesn't boggle my mind.
Because
I don't know the answer. No, I'm very open to whatever that's going to look like.
I mean, I'm open to it, but I guess I'm just kind of curious. Like, it's interesting to me.
So, I mean, why is it that after the resurrection, the apostles are like, "Who's this?"
Yeah, I was about to
All
say
the
that.
time.
I was
All the
about
time.
to say that. Jesus was
even
different.
the women, like Mary Magdalene,
Yeah.
she hears the voice but thinks it's the gardener. Well, why? Well, why does she think it's the gardener? I don't know, because
There is
he
something.
looks the same but different. I don't know, and that's
Yeah.
not clear.
Yeah.
I just know it'll
And
be
Jim says
better.
33 years old.
There you go. Well,
The perfect age.
the prime age. I'm past my prime.
Could be.
Jim's past his prime. We're all past our
I'm
prime.
done. I'm past my prime. But I think it is interesting to think, like, I mean, so that is a blow against my theology, my philosophy of the soul, right? As being something that is an identifying piece, a marriage between the physical and the metaphysical, the physical and the spiritual. Is that Jesus in his glorified body was not recognized. That's like a huge blow to that.
Well, he is ultimately, but at first glance, right? Like first glance, it's always like, who's that? Who's that on the seashore? Who's that? Who is that? Oh,
Maybe he was shaved.
and then I recognize. No, I doubt that. Jesus is totally gonna have a beard, man.
Oh, I don't know.
He's a Jew. Gotta have a beard.
We talked about that today in Sunday school. I said,
"Oh, really?
Yeah, well, because I said just randomly, I said because we do this like concentration thing in the beginning to get people focused. I said, all right, I want you guys to picture Jesus's beard. All right, go." And everybody's like, "Ew." I was like, "Ew." I said, like, imagine hugging Jesus and feeling his beard on you. And it's amazing the different receptions,
Sure,
it's like a sociological study in there. It's like, wow, people's reaction to beards.
There's some old Roman. I was just trying to think here. I think there's in the catacombs. There's a. I don't think it's that one. I think it's a fresco of the good of the good, like an image of the Good Shepherd.
Scott will know.
And that image is a beardless image of Christ. Those are very rare.
Didn't he have like a little? He has like a little goatee or something.
No, this one it's
nothing.
It's not that detailed, but it's younger. He's younger. But again, it's metaphor. It's symbol. Yeah, typically the traditional iconographic image of the Lord has him bearded.
Yeah.
So, like a
yeah,
good,
I mean, see,
like a good
that's
Jewish
something
man
that bothers me. It is something that bothers me, but it's probably more of a cultural thing for me. The culture of my family is the beards are good. But it is something that bothers me when people are anti-beard. It feels.
That's an interesting question, or an interesting cultural. And we're going way off topic, but that's fun. I mean, like beard. So, for whatever reason, and I don't know the answer to this, Roman culture has been a culture that has very much been into shaving.
But see,
for a long time.
Yes, because it idolized infants, it idolized children,
or
sexualized
or young men. I don't know.
Yeah.
I suppose that's an explanation, but it's very old. It's very. I mean, it dates back even before. I don't know. It's just old. I don't know. I'm just trying to think if I know of any other cultures that are.
Well, and there are some
Christian
cultures that can't grow beards. It's
Sure.
like the American Indians. Native Americans
and some
Asians,
Asian cultures. Yeah.
So it's So I can't.
Does
I can't
God
fully embrace the theology of the beard?
The theology of the beard. Does God have a beard?
But this is kind of what I was getting to in our discussion of the soul. Scott says, it bothers me to hear the broader evangelical emphasis on the notion of just going to heaven after dying.
Well, sure.
There's not much, if any, attention given to the reality of the new heavens and the new earth, and our physical participation in the redeemed cosmos. Ooh, I love that. The
Well,
redeemed
yeah,
cosmos.
yeah, and I hear you, Scott. And my big fear with it, yes, on the one hand, I just want to go yes and amen, and be very afraid of overrealized eschatologies. The social justice gospel of the early 20th century is an overrealized eschatology.
Say more.
So, right? So it's like when people talk about, well, we just need to do kingdom work, or we're building the kingdom. At least this is my perspective. That it wants to try to take away the tension of the what's begun and yet not finished in the here and now, versus like, so the 20th century. I think the problem with the 20th century, both in certain Christian circles and then abroad outside of Christian circles, is utopianism. This desire for utopia now, and not recognizing that we're in the midst of the reconciling of all things, but that's all pending on the return of the Lord, right? Like there's a lot of things that are held in tension until that moment in history, and sometimes there's this desire to fast forward, but to Scott's point, there's a lot that can be experienced now. But the fullness,
well, I think
the
that's what he's
fullness yet
saying.
remains. Yeah, no, I think it is, but I want to put in a little like warning
A
slash
cautionary.
cautionary caveat.
Yeah, caveat. Okay.
Because like the prosperity gospel, the social gospel of the 20th century, those are all overrealized eschatologies.
In
And
other words,
overrealized eschatologies equal utopianism equals a lot of bad. It's either bad theology or it ends up being brutal and violent.
Interesting. He said, by the way, regarding beards, people were upset when Caravaggio painted the resurrected Christ without a beard in one of his two depictions of Christ in the supper at Emmaus. Now, see, that's where my mind went with because they didn't recognize him either. His disciples there.
I mean, maybe he got a shave when harrowing hell. I don't know. Probably not. I'm going to argue for probably not. But who knows? I mean, so what was up with Caravaggio? I mean, like, what was he doing?
Caravaggio, dude, we've been looking at Caravaggio. Let me see if I can find some of the pictures. Wait. Jim Pass says utopianism implies equality, and there will be no equality in heaven. Well, there won't be equality in heaven? I know what you mean as far as like it assumes that we're all equal now because
equal in what
we're
way?
We're all going to heaven, right? What do you mean, Jim? What do you mean? Because I do believe we will be equal in heaven. Well, I mean, to his point, though, will we be equal with God? No. And we will be over the angels. That says that very clearly.
Yes.
Wait, right? Or a little lower than the angels.
Well, depends on where you read it, right?
Yeah.
That's the nature of progressive revelation.
You keep using that word, progressive.
It is progressive.
So we've been actually on our Monday night. We took a long break. Scott and I. Oh, he sent me a photo.
of the beardless
Okay.
road to Emmaus.
Yeah. I gotta take
Painting.
a look at this. I'll show you what he's talking about here, because we've been looking at Caravaggio.
It's when I go, Romans, Italians.
You Italians.
You Italians.
Well, but I mean, there is something just, especially in art, as an artist, it's difficult for me to just, and I think that's where my father was coming from, to just dismiss the human body as crude, like,
oh, sure.
that's hard. Jim says, think about the assignment of the talents, 2, 5, and 10.
Uh-huh.
But that's on Earth, right? Like the talents would be played out on Earth.
Well, that's a parable. But even I understand. I think where Jim's coming from. Like, even if you look at the Gospel of St. John, well, I'll take a broad brush here. The Gospels are pretty clear about rewards in heaven, and those are not equal. And even though Jesus says, "I go to prepare a place for you,"
yeah, you're right.
There are many mentions. Heaven. Yeah. So there isn't necessarily, to Jim's point, there's not radical equality as far as what that looks like.
That's true. What our reward? Yeah, our reward is not the same.
So there's equality. There's equality and equity, shall we say, in heaven. If you get in, you get in, and some get more, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's true.
Whatever that looks like.
Good point, Jim and Josh. So here is the picture he was talking about. Now,
okay,
I see a little scruff down there. No,
well, it's shadow, right? It's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah,
but it begs an interesting question of like, what is Caravaggio's what is he trying to say here?
Yeah,
with this kind of almost radical. It's a radical figure of Christ, which I'm sure is why he took a little bit of heat.
Well, and there are I have certain Jewish friends that have a difficult time growing a lot of beard down here.
Well, this depends on what kind of their ancestry.
There is a real Asian influence in the Jewish lineage?
Well, right? It depends, because there's Ashkenazi Jews and they're
Semitic and Ashkenazi.
Yeah, it gets complicated.
Yeah. Fascinating. But so we've been looking at skin tone, but not just skin tone, but like the depiction of humans and the human form, which I think that gets into the idea of
very
the Imagio.
Renaissance looking painting, right? Like these guys are sitting, they're dressed, it's a contemporary painting. The furniture is contemporary. The attire is I would say the attire is contemporary, except for Jesus. He's looking a little old school there, isn't he?
Well, he's got the draped over, yeah. Whereas they kinda, like sweaters.
They're just busting out with some,
Renaissance era
clothing.
Yeah, you're right. And they got a tablecloth. I don't know. Tablecloths were common. I don't know though. But see, the one thing that he pointed out, the difference between the Renaissance, sort of classical paintings, and more contemporary, more, what is it called?
Help us out, Scott.
Huh?
Say, help us out. I know you're out there somewhere.
Sorry, we talked about the classical versus the what is it called? That they do. It's a little less detailed and
like
impressionists. The impressionists.
Sure.
Yeah. So look the difference. The biggest difference. He pointed this out. The background, dark backgrounds.
Yeah, dark backgrounds. Well, the use of light. The use of light is significantly different.
So you can hear more about that every other
Yeah.
Monday or
there's
Tuesday now.
right. So there's more light, but the the figures themselves are much more obscured.
Yeah.
Whereas the background is dark, but the figures are very
Yeah, well,
crisp.
this one is very dark, but much more detailed. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, we got to wrap things up, but I think it's a fascinating. I appreciate your perspective and appreciate the comments here
Yeah,
from
thank you all for
Jim.
chiming in.
Oh, he said some word.
I'll
That I don't know.
let you try to pronounce that word.
Kai
Chiaroscuro?
Chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro.
Chiaroscuro?
Curioscio. Curio.
All right. I'll have to Google that one.
What was that? Was that what we were talking about? Missed that word. But there was something. Anyways, he knows so much about it. Check out our other videos on the arts with Scott. Interesting stuff.
Oh, the Scott.
We got to go. It's been an hour exactly now. But man, I could talk to you for hours. I could talk to all you guys for hours, but particularly you, Josh. Appreciate you tuning in today and
It's been a
not
little
just
while.
tuning in, being
Yeah.
here. Yeah, missed you.
Missed you too, brother.
And we'll be back here probably next week. What do you say?
If the Lord's willing, the creek don't rise.